Welcome to Gracefully Imperfect, a podcast for the all-encompassing Black man, the professional, the entrepreneur, the student, the family man, the father, and the everyday survivor. I'm your host, Semantic7, and on this journey together, we will discuss all things related to fatherhood and parenting, morality and ethics, striving to become mentally healthy, our role within our households and our family, health and fitness, and I dare not to forget, there will be a lot of sharing of our personal developmental stories that have shaped us to who we are today. So let's go on this journey together and center our consciousness, relax our mind. Off we go to the depths below. Love, peace, blessing, and abundance to all of you tuning in today on another episode. Oh, how grateful and thankful I am for every single one of you, and you out there in your respective locations, tuning in to listen to your boy bring truth, wisdom, knowledge to all of you. And from that, I know you didn't hear answers. This is not a math formula. Life experiences are quite complex, and we can only understand what we have the capacity to understand. And so I just want to say I don't take any episode for granted. The fact that I am locked in, loaded, and ready to give you all as much as I can possibly give, it is a blessing from the Most High. And if it wasn't for the Most High, it wasn't for the Creator and the universe giving me the tools, the techniques, the knowledge, the experiences, I wouldn't be able to do this. And I also want to express my gratitude that you chose this podcast out of the thousands of other podcasts that are out there, especially the podcasts that are dealing with mental health and wellness and purpose and productivity. You chose Gracefully Imperfect, and for that, I am thankful. Well, for all those that have not been on the podcast before, every Monday, we do a little thing called Poetic Prose Monday. Granted, this isn't Monday, it's Tuesday, but still, it's overdue. Poetic Prose Monday is where we celebrate one of the oldest art forms of self-expression, poetry. We champion the lived, the past experiences, and we synthesize that in a performative product to help us make it make sense. We believe that art imitates life, and life is fluid. There's ebbs and flows. There's no blueprint. There's hardly any reference material. And Poetic Prose Monday is to provide myself and all of you just a slither of a blueprint, just a piece of the puzzle. so that when you're going off on your respective days and you are experiencing all that life is blessing you and privileging you with, the poetry will, hopefully, the poetry will resonate with you. It will stay ingrained and entrenched in your mind, body, and soul. So if you're ever in a situation where you're dealing with so many different emotions, you're dealing with a specific event, the poetry will manifest into knowledge, into wisdom, maybe even into action. That is what poetic prose is all about. Using this beautiful art form that I love to talk about life. Simple and plain. In the light of Mental Health Awareness Month, I decided to choose a piece that I wrote a year ago, on just how dark and how gloomy it can be when the weight of anxiety, stress, angst, vexation, when it weighs down on you and it paralyzes you. This poem is called The Island of Nowhere. Off in the misty distance, images of obscurity and distortion. Chaos begets confusion, and confusion begets vexation. Perspective is lost. Reality becomes an illusion. Cognition is severely altered. Insulating fears and anxiety is the remedy. A precursor to exile and isolation, the aftermath is quite shocking. Loneliness, spiraling thoughts, erraticism, neurosis, melancholy, heartache, immense depression drowning logic and reasoning. That's the island of nowhere. I think that last line for me is what really brings power to this entire piece. Immense depression drowning logic and reasoning. Wow. Depression can be so crippling. It can just consume you. It can take you to another dimension, to where reality is not the present, to where you don't see the people around you who love you and care for you and who have concern for you. You don't even have the capacity to love yourself and look yourself in the mirror and say, I have to do better by this person. I have the tools and the strengths to make this person more resilient. Depression can literally submerge you in so much grief and sorrow that becomes the norm. You lose the ability to crack a smile. You lose the ability to tell a joke or even laugh at a joke. You cannot think for yourself. Discernment becomes an afterthought. Decision making is a lost art. And that's what I kind of grasp from that last line. It kind of culminates all these different emotions into this one thing: immense depression, drowning logic and reasoning. When I wrote this, I wasn't in a negative headspace, but I reflected on my time being in that negative headspace and being consumed and submerged by grief, by sadness, by despair. And I tried to tap into that and ask myself some critical questions. What happens when anxiety kicks in? What happens when depression kicks in? And what does that do to my mind, body, and soul? Those are the three questions that I asked myself in order to write an impactful, reflective piece. And when you're not in a depressive state or a state of anxiety, when you're writing, it can be very challenging. I'm not going to speak for all writers. Specifically for me, when I write, I have to feel the feelings of the piece. I have to visualize the experience. I have to be able to place myself in that time and space to help illustrate the goings on. And if I'm unable to do that, in my eyes, from my point of view, it lacks authenticity and it lacks reality. So as I was putting this piece together, after I asked those three questions, now I have to place myself in a situation where I was my most vulnerable and susceptible to depression and anxiety. And there's been a lot of situations where I have dealt with both of them. And it has really placed me in a space where I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, heart's racing. I have no energy to give to my wife, to my children. I'm just a vessel taking up space. And I don't say that to be, with a lack of compassion. I say that I was a vessel just taking up space because in that moment in time, I realized that I couldn't give the people around me what they needed. And what I needed at that time is to just sink in the sadness I didn't want to come out of it. I wanted to crawl deeper and deeper into the abyss. That is depression. Just because it's sun outside and the flowers are blooming, the birds are chirping, doesn't mean you want to crawl out your cave and go for a walk. No, I wanted to stay there. So I thought about a time where I was my most vulnerable. And I went through a period where I was contemplating conscientious objection from the Army, where the weight of that decision, the decision to pursue it and request the discharge, it went from stress to overwhelming. And if you battle with anxiety and depression, you know that when stress piles up and you don't process it, manage it, handle it in an effective way, all that does is just makes way for other intense emotions. It keeps the door open. And that's what happened for me. At the time, I wasn't going to counseling, to therapy. I think I went on a 3-month hiatus. We were doing homeschool. And so I put the needs of my children before mine. My wife was working from home, so I wanted to alleviate the stressors from the virtual academy from my wife. And so I took on full-time schooling I think we started every day around 7:30. It ended around 3 p.m. Both of my children. At the time, they were second grade and pre-K. And as I'm ensuring that they're getting the best quality education, alleviating stressors from my wife, so all she has to worry about is her job as a social media manager, is to is the weight that's on my shoulder about requesting discharge after a decade of military experience, something that I have given my life to since I was 18 years old, that has provided my family and I substance, economic stability, economic opportunities, traveling experience, cultural experience, and the privilege not to get consumed by uh, by recession, by COVID-19 pandemic, or even by the inability of our politicians to come up with the budget every year. Because no matter what, the defense budget gets done, so that means military gets paid. And as you heard all of that, a lot of that has to do with money. And my relationship with money during this time was so toxic in my eyes. Everything was about money. I didn't give much thought about personal growth, personal development, wellness, self-care, self-love, compassionate for self. I didn't give much thought about that. And the fact that I was about to make this decision was going to hurt hurt me so much because now I'm ruminating on all these possibilities of not being able to provide a financially stable future. And if you remember from the poem, spiraling thoughts. So being stressed by this decision led to being overwhelmed. And then once I'm overwhelmed, it's open field. I started to lash out in anger. I couldn't I couldn't focus. We're supposed to be doing homeschool, and there was time I couldn't get past an hour in the day. It was deteriorating my ability to be present with my children. Every moment I was a walking ticking bomb. And that ended up leading to the depression, because when all that piles up, all that stuff is just weighing in on you, and it's building up on the inside. What happens? You implode. And when I imploded, that's where I got into my depressive state. And all the things that all the things that I was doing, and the intentions that I had behind them, the homeschool, relieving the stresses from my wife, providing my kids a quality education, I couldn't do it. I stayed in bed. I stayed in my room. I did not eat. I barely drank any water. I did not work out. I did not write. I did not do any reading. My kids would come in and try to comfort me. And I want to be left alone. And I didn't know how to explain that to them. So I had to tap into that moment, those critical moments, those emotionally provocative moments. And by tapping into those moments, I was able to walk the floor that I walked. It's almost as if I was a hologram, and look at myself from the ceiling, looking down to our bed to see exactly what I was doing, curled up in the covers, crying. Crying profusely. Watching myself trying to do the daily activities that I'm accustomed of doing. And the anger, the shame, the deep seated sadness manifested into anger, uncontrollable frustration. Tapping into that was extremely challenging when you've learned how to manage or semi-manage your anxiety and your depression. So by doing that, I believe that it helped me create a poetic product that is a reflection, if not of not only just my personal experience, but because we share a lot in existential pain, that it's the experience for some of you out there too. And so at the end of writing this piece, I had to go and had to go for a walk, a long walk. And I had to go feed the squirrels. Took out some cashews and went to the park and sat down and fed squirrels because that brings me happiness, brings me a peace of mind. Because tapping into this was mentally draining and exhausting. And I ask all of you out there who are still listening and still tuned in, what is your most vulnerable moment? And what did you learn from it? If you are still here, you prevailed in some kind of way. And you overcame all of that some kind of way. And that is worth celebrating. I want to leave you all with the quote of the day. Not until we are lost do we begin to understand ourselves. Henry David Thoreau. I just want to say this has been a phenomenal episode. I love being here with all of you. I express nothing but graciousness and gratefulness for you all sitting with me, listening, being your most emotional, vulnerable, and imperfect selves, and embracing that. And I ask that as this podcast goes forward, that you come along as well. We need your support. We need your love. And we need your feedback. So please hit up the Gmail account, poeticsemantic7@gmail.com. Send us an inquiry, a question, testimonial. And then also Instagram at semantically_imperfect. Follow us. Talk with us. Communicate with us. We want to hear you. Your voice matters. This podcast is nothing without the people. And then finally, like the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, and send a review on Anchor, Google, Apple Podcasts, whatever is your fancy. Show some love, and I promise I will show love back. So thank you again for being here. Thank you all for tuning in. And I can't wait to see you all and talk with you all on the next episode. Peace.